You have to have tenacity. And racing, I think, is the biggest sport where you need tenacity. You're going to get stopped so many times. There's going to be years where you just don't have the funding. You don't think it's going to continue. And that's when you have to keep pushing and trying to find it.
Bam! How are you doing, brother?
Dude, I'm excited. I hope we didn't use everything up. We drove here together and had a great 45-minute conversation with the boys, and we've got to rehash that. It was good. That was so organic. I felt like what we had going on.
It was natural, right?
It was, yeah. We've covered a lot of ground, so we got to redo it now.
Yes. Well, I want the listeners and viewers to know that look, you getting ready to be 30. You've already won the Indy Series twice.
Yep.
Right? You didn't finish traditional high school, dropped out. You didn't go to college. You finished school in England. You won a race that no other American has ever won in England. I want to talk a little bit about your history and story to give them the background.
Yeah.
And then I want to get into you and me, and let's collaborate again. Fair enough. So
love it.
You grew up in Nashville, Tennessee?
Yeah, I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, just north in a suburb called Hendersonville.
Okay.
Pretty normal suburban life. Came from a really great family. My father was in the picture making business with my grandfather. Loved racing growing up, but I played baseball and basketball, so kind of normal stick and ball sports. But always saw racing on TV. Always wanted to be involved in that. But yeah, Nashville, Tennessee is where I grew up. And then, the story kind of takes off when I was 13. I was always begging to get into racing in some way. And my parents just were super risk adverse. Getting a bicycle for me was actually hard when I was a kid.
Wow.
Had great loving parents, but they just did not want me to get injured. So
how did you convince them at 13? Because I know you said before, you were begging to get into racing. Wow. How did you convince them? I mean, the salesman already at 13?
I was relentless in my pursuit for it. Anything that I could get into that had motion or, could go fast or had anything about that, I wanted to be involved. Anything that I could tinker with. I loved engines. I loved the engineering behind race cars, Legos. I was huge into Legos, Connects, anything that had engineering behind it or how to build it or how to make it go quick. I was so drawn to that as a kid. So I think it was just my desire to really be a part of it. And finally my dad, because my dad's huge into racing. I grew up with it on TV. So it's not like he didn't like it. I just don't think he wanted me to be in that from a risk standpoint. He wanted me to be a center fielder for the New York Yankees. That was his vision. He's like,
all dads want that.
He's like, we're going to play baseball. You're going to be amazing at it. And I loved baseball, but I wasn't passionate about it.
Yeah.
I could tell I was passionate about racing.
Even at 13, this is what baffles me.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And for the listeners and viewers out there, we always say there's a why, and you got to chase your why, and it's about passion. And too many times we get stuck doing things either our parents tell us we need to do, peers tell us what we need to do, teachers, family members. They always set this cycle of what it is. But when you have this passion at 13, you already know that's what I want to do. Correct?
Yeah, 100%. And like I said, I loved baseball. I played basketball too. I loved competing. I knew I loved sports, but it wasn't the right competition area. It wasn't, I could tell racing, that's what I wanted to be a part of it. It had a different aspect to it than stick and ball sports. The engineering side of it was super interesting to me. So when you get involved in racing, it's the competition element of racing itself. You're trying to beat all the competitors around you and be the fastest on the track. But it's everything else that's involved with it that almost interested me. It's like, well, how is the go-kart built? What do we do to the go-kart to make it quicker? If it's hot out or if it's cold out, how do we adjust for those things? How do you work with a pit crew? How do you work with different people to get the most out of a race weekend and make decisions together? It
sounded like you were almost addicted to the challenges that it included. It wasn't just let me go out and hit a ball. Nothing against baseball players out there, but this was so complex that it sounds like you were excited about all the different things you had to figure out on this, right?
You know what I loved about it is the process. And I that can be used for anything. I think everything has a process, but the process of racing is so layered to me, and it's so unknown. People that watch the sport on TV, you watch race car drivers going around a track, you think it's just about speed, who's more daring, who's the quickest, and it's just about the driver driving the car. But there are so many other things that make a race event happen, that make the car successful, that make the driver successful on the day. And it's the process of going racing. It's how the car is built. It's how the car is operated across a race weekend. It's not just the race itself. You show up 3 days before the race, and it's how you show up that first day, how you practice, how you qualify, and then how you build a race car and then race the car on the race day. So it's a whole evolution through a race weekend. And I love that process. Now that I'm a professional at it, you're doing it at a super high level. You're working with a team of, 50 people at the racetrack. You got 4 different cars, and you're all trying to get the most out of that situation for each given weekend and beating 25 other competitors. And it's not just so much as, hey, I'm the best guy, I've got the most talent, so I'm going to rock up and beat these guys. Even the best dudes out there, they have to be so good at nailing that process and killing it for 72 hours. It's not just, hey, I show up on race day and I do a great job and I go home. It's I'm there 72 hours before and I am on it throughout the whole weekend and I'm killing the process every day. And if you do really well at that, everything aligns up, yeah, you're going to win a race that weekend.
Sounds like running a business. You got so many things there that you've got to scale and be really good at to, 4 different cars, the how is the pit going to work? How does practice go? Qualifying. You were 13. You told me last night that you would travel to Indianapolis all the time. Indianapolis 500 was a big deal. And your parents said, yes, you can get into go-kart racing. And then you started to be successful in that as you would go there every weekend. But one thing that you brought up to me last night that I think the listeners, they think it was just talent. People don't understand that there is a business element to this, to being successful in motorsports, where you had to, because you're a natural introvert, right?
100%. Yeah.
And you
didn't believe
tell,
that. Yeah.
Right? I was like, no way. But I get it. And you had to learn, and I want you to explain to listeners that you could have the best talent in the world, but it was 20% talent, 80% you having that business form to sell yourself. Explain that to the listeners, how important that is in racing.
Yeah, I mean, take this for example. Anyone that's watching this video, you say, I have my arms crossed. I got to learn to not do that sometimes too.
Yeah.
That's part of the things I've had to learn is to be open, to be, projecting and to have a voice, to be able to represent a brand and to speak knowledgeably about a group of people. Because at the end of the day, as a race car driver, you're the representative. You are the quarterback for the team. You're the leader.
Yeah.
You have the owners, you have the sponsors and all that, and they're in a way the leaders too. But everyone feeds off that race car driver. So if I'm this shelled off person,
you're the face.
You are.
You're everything. Yeah.
The team literally hangs on every word you say for direction, whether that's for a race weekend or for development in the off season. I mean, we spend a lot of money in the off season trying to make our cars better every year. And every word that you say as the driver, that the team hangs on that as for direction on where are we going to spend our money? What direction are we going in? So, if you're just this shelled off person, I'm naturally an introvert, it's really hard to be successful in that environment. So as a person, I had to learn to adapt to that. I knew this is how I was, but I wanted to be a successful race car driver, and not only success, I wanted to be the best ever. Yeah. That's still my goal. The reason I'm in competition is I want to do it better than anyone's ever done it.
It's not about money. It's about winning.
It's about being the best, dude.
Right, that's winning.
And if for me, the money's a byproduct of that.
It's a tangible item you get because you're chasing success and winning.
100%. And I of course I wanted to be successful and make money, but I knew, for me, if I focused on just being the best at my craft and being better than everyone else at that, I knew the byproduct of money and all, everything else around it would come with it. So I think if you focus on the right things, then all the intangibles that you kind of need, the money side of it, it all kind of follows suit. So, for me, it's focusing on the right thing. And I always told people this, I was like, hey, for me and my craft, the bread and butter is performing at the racetrack, being the right representative, learning how to be an extrovert and represent my brand, represent my company, and be knowledgeable about my team and my people. If I can be really good at that, I know that everything else will take care of itself. And yeah, I'm working on that stuff too. But if I'm not successful at, showing up, representing the brand and kicking butt at the racetrack and leading the team, then nothing else is going to work around me, at least in my environment. I think it's the same thing in business if you're leading a company.
It's exactly that. And I learned mine from either failure or experience. And I know you did the same because you didn't get from A to Z without hitting all the other letters in the alphabet, which is times that you had to learn to come out of your shell. Mm-hmm. And so, Josef, listen, I love the way last night you articulated how when you got into racing as a kid, it wasn't just your skill set. You had to sell yourself. You had to go out there, and you were an introvert. You had to come out of your shell like you just talked about, and you had to go out there and pitch to different brands to invest in a kid racing. Yeah. Talk about that and talk about some of the no's that you got told to make you better.
I would be remiss if I didn't say, look, when you're a 13-year-old, I don't know all about this, right? So a lot of this I learned from my father. And without my dad, this would never have worked out. So I've been so fortunate to have the family that I had. Specifically, my father. He's the one that taught me. It sounds so cliche, but dude, it's so true. He is the ultimate dreamer and believer in a positive way. He believes that you can go and work and make anything happen in life. So I grew up with that mantra. Yeah. I knew he told me I could be anything I wanted to be. Anything that I desired or was passionate about, there's no problem in going and chasing and pursuing that. So, obviously when we got into go-karting when I was 13 together, it became me and my dad doing it. And he's the one that pushed to make it happen. He really invested. I mean, emotionally and personally, he was so reluctant. He was the one person that didn't want me to do it. And then when we started, he was all in. And he was the biggest champion for me. So he really set the tone for me to say, you have to be a hustler. You have to have tenacity. And racing, I think, is the biggest sport where you need tenacity. You're going to get stopped so many times. There's going to be years where you just don't have the funding. You don't think it's going to continue. And that's when you have to keep pushing and trying to find it. So the story's a bit long with my career. I raced go-karts for 2 years, 13 and 14. Then I get into junior racing cars. You start figuring out, okay, I want to be an IndyCar driver one day. Where do we go next? And you start racing these little baby Indy cars, right? Mm-hmm. So I went to racing school, learned how to drive a formula car, which is what an Indy car is. And then you try and understand the system. Okay, what are the levels, And in racing, it's kind of like playing park league baseball to high school baseball, then to college. And then hopefully you get drafted into like AAA, and then maybe you go to the pros, right? There's levels to it. Racing's no different. You're starting with go-karts, and then you go to cars, and you got to work up the levels. So once I got into car racing, it was, all right, how do we find the money to really make this happen? Because it gets expensive. Mm-hmm. Racing is a sport where you have to have sponsorship. You have to have funding. The gas isn't going to appear out of nowhere. The tires aren't going to appear out of nowhere. The mechanics aren't going to appear out of nowhere. Someone's got to pay the bill, right?
And most race car drivers don't have the means to do it.
Most don't. Some do. If you're fortunate to come from the right background, or maybe your grandfather or somebody has the means to make it happen. And believe me, I was very fortunate. We had the means to start out more than others. So we could pay for go-karting. We could pay for those first levels of racing cars. But once you get to that point, you hit a wall and you go, man, to go to the next level and to keep trying to progress and get to the professional level, you need so much funding and backing that it almost looks impossible. You're like, well, how am I going to go sell myself? How am I going to make a business out of myself and maybe become a professional race car driver one day? A lot of the way people do it is through an investment vehicle. You have to get people to invest into yourself as a business. And so you hear a lot of success stories for race car drivers that made it and had a 20-year career, that they found people to invest into them. And they took on a big risk, but they sold them the idea that, look, I'm worth this risk. We have a plan in place. And if we stick to it, we can make it to the professional level. And that's really what happened with me. There was an investment vehicle that got put into place, created a company, essentially. People invested into my future, and trying to fuel that excitement for the potential and the growth. It's hard to do, because just from a commercial standpoint, if you're like, hey, I'm going to go sell, let's take Power Home Solar. Yeah. There would be no value for me trying to pitch Power Home Solar and saying, please come sponsor my race car. I can't give you any visibility. Now, unless I have like a B2B relationship, and this is where race car drivers get really creative. They'll take a company like Power Home Solar and they'll say, okay, let me figure out what Power Home Solar needs, and I'm going to go try and fulfill that need, and I'm going to bring it to you. Now, if I can bring you a business deal that works for Power Home Solar, and I can get, sort of an offset from that deal, or at least a cut of that, and then use it for sponsorship, it's a win-win for everybody. Wow. And, that's how it works. So B2B business deals have become so popular with race car drivers. They're either doing that or they're creating an investment vehicle for themselves to try and make it to the top level. And most guys, they rely on that investment vehicle, trying to find the right people to back them. And I've got some crazy stories with that.
I would like to hear, like you talked about your wall, your back's against the wall, and it's almost most people, in life, they quit. They're scared to pursue their dreams. Good for your pops, dude, to tell you that, you can do what you want to do. Too many people, they think it's cliche and they think it's nonsense or bullshit, and that's wrong. It really is. Everybody has a choice every single day. You write your own map.
Yeah, no
you
doubt.
Choose, you go left or right. You're going to get up. You're not going to get up. You're going to be positive. You choose that shit. Your dad instilled that in you. So great for him, where you're like, hey, I can do this. If he believes in me, I believe in myself. Other people will believe in me. I always say scared money don't make money, but you've got to be able to believe and bet on yourself first. Otherwise, no one else will bet on you. You went in and you had some no's early on, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah.
Until you got good enough to get some yeses. Tell us about a no, what it made you feel like.
The most famous one for me is I moved to England when I was 17. Mm-hmm. I got this scholarship through this program. It was a basic program called the Team USA Scholarship, right? And it was for these young racing drivers. They would select 2 young Americans to take them over and compete in Europe. And Europe was considered like super cutthroat compared to America, like very difficult to go and race over there because the competition level was so deep. You'd be running in these fields of 30 people and all 30 of them would be top level.
Yeah.
So the depth of talent is what made it enticing for young drivers to go over there. And it's like a really good environment to try and push yourself, right? And become better. So I got the scholarship, went over there, ended up winning this super prestigious race for young race car drivers.
The only American to ever do so.
I'm still the only American to ever win it.
Dude.
It's called the Formula Ford Festival. And people that watch racing, they may be familiar with it. It's a junior level race, but for young drivers, for young drivers that want to go to Formula One day or want to go to IndyCar, if you win that race, it's a huge deal. You know, people look at that in motorsports and they go, okay, you're able to win that race. It's a big deal. So it kind of put me on the map. Then I moved over to England full time when that happened. Ended up running over there in this championship all around England as a young 18-year-old kid. Time of my life.
Oh yeah.
You know, I was by myself. My parents actually, shipped me over there and I was just living there by myself with another roommate. I think I was actually still 17 at the time when it started and did really well in that year. It was 2009. Ended up finishing second in the championship. Just missed it by a little. And so that can be a little bit of a deterrent. You don't win the championship. Sometimes it's hard to move up to that next level. Mm-hmm. And so I had my eyes on moving up to the next level, but I just didn't have the funding. Lo and behold, I found a backer that wanted to back me. He's like, I understand your path. You want to go to Formula One in Europe. This is your dream. You have this investment vehicle in place. I want to invest. I'm going to be your guy. You can go to the next level. Worked on this deal for like 2 months with this backer. Everything in place, went to the race team for that next year, built a seat, got to know everybody, got to know the mechanics, got to know the team situation and environment. Literally showed up for that first preseason test. It's where everyone's getting together before the year. It's like, I'm going to run with this team. We're going to run this championship together. This is the team I'm running with. Waiting for the check to clear. Had contracts signed, the whole deal. This guy's like, no, we got it. The check's going to come. It's going to hit the bank account. And the team's like, no, for sure. Sitting there on the test day, he's like, it's going to clear this morning, 10 a.m. No check. This guy goes silent. Had contracts, everything. Just completely falls through. And there I am at the last minute. The season's about to start. I have no funding in place. It never cleared. This guy completely fell through on me.
What does that feel like? I mean, the stomach's dropped right now, right?
Yeah, you feel helpless. What are you going to do? But you have to.
How old are you?
19 at the time.
19 years old, working this deal, get a backer, go show up, checks clearing. You're like, this is kind of like, I'm not you. I just want to race. But you're learning this process. You're gaining these life skills that are going to help your career because of this. Go ahead. So check doesn't clear. Go ahead.
A lot of it wasn't the mistake of the due diligence. This is a deal that just didn't work out. You found the right person, fell through at the end, never happened. But you've just got to move on to the next situation. You got to go, okay, well, how am I going to pick up the pieces and make something out of this year? Luckily a lot of what I'll actually talk about, which I wanted to talk about, is it's all about people. When you go through your life, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Mm-hmm. It's the people that you meet. It's the interactions you have. It's the relationships you build. Yeah. When one relationship fails, that other relationship may come through, mm-hmm. And the way you treat people, that all comes back around. It takes people to make things happen.
I agree.
That you've got to rely on a team, on a network, a friendship group. That you can't do things alone. That I think you've got to be a warrior. I think you've got to be able to look after yourself. But to me, a major mistake is not realizing that it takes the people that you interact with and like to make things happen. It takes a team in anything. Yeah. You've got to be able to work together. It's just impossible to build mountains yourself.
One superhero is only so good, can't take on the world. But you get the entire Avengers or Justice League together, game changer. I agree.
100%. So, all these people that I've met throughout my journey now, I'm still in my junior career. We're talking about this, this deal that fell through. I've got 5 years of a network of people that I've worked with, I've interacted with, I've done business with, I've gone racing with. And so when this happened, I had another lifeline from another contact that I'd known really well in Europe. And basically they had a seat open on another championship that I wasn't supposed to run. And they said, look, we want you to come drive for us. And we think we can get the funding in place and make it happen. And that's what happened. I thought my career was over. I was like, it's too late. I'm going to have to sit out a season. It's going to be a huge bump in the road for me. And I don't know that I can recover from it. You take a year off at that age. You don't know if things will work out.
But you didn't quit.
Didn't quit. Took full advantage of that lifeline, made the most of it. And what ended up happening was I won that championship that year. Seriously. And this was Indy Lights 2011. Yep. And in 2011, winning that championship was the springboard to getting a professional contract to go IndyCar racing. And it got me a 3-year deal to start out on the professional level. So you can't give up on it. You got to keep working on it. You you can't close any bridges, in my opinion. You can't burn them. I mean, it's so important to have that network and to cultivate the relationships that you have with people, because all this stuff comes back around and you're going to rely on those people one day.
You said it. You said it perfectly. And one thing we talked about before we started the show, and I was discussing with you, is your passion for what your craft is, right? Some people, they're really good at things and they're talented, but they don't have passion. So it gets them so far. I mean, maybe they're a great football player, a great basketball player, a great salesman, but they don't love something, so they only become good. But to become great, you were talking about process, and a lot of well over my head when it comes to racing, right? That you know it from A to Z. You understand it. You breathe, eat, sleep, all of it. Where some of your peers might not be that way. It makes you so viable to the industry, important to your brand, important to grow. The experience that you're getting, you know what to look for, what not to look for. You have so many different opportunities in your future in the career because you understand all the process and the relations you've made. And you were a kid that was an introvert, that this whole process, I mean, running around England at 17, 18 years old, I mean, you're getting mature and you're getting life lessons that school doesn't teach you. I mean, that's pretty impressive that you love this much, that you know so much about it. I've talked to other athletes. I've known a couple of race car drivers in North Carolina. They don't have the depth of their industry and the passion. I've never seen anything like it. It's exciting, right? It means that this is built for you. This is your calling and you are jacked about it. And a lot of people miss that boat. A lot of people get scared and quit. You didn't. And that's impressive.
You know, for me, it's the drive of the competition. I love competition, and without it, I wouldn't be fueled every day. Honestly, I mean, people ask, you know, what do you really love about racing? And yeah, I love to just race. It's fun. You know, you tell people about it, they're super interested in that, right? It's a very rare thing to tell someone like, hey, I drive race cars for a living. It's like saying you're an astronaut. Like, how many astronauts do you meet every day, right?
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's just an
Is that a hobby? Yeah, okay.
It's so, I don't think most people don't believe you if they don't know who you are. They're like, okay, yeah, that's fun.
We heard that last night. You came to a dinner of mine last night. And for the listeners, viewers out there, we've never hung out. We've had 2 phone calls.
Yeah.
And done some stuff with Power Home. And I was like, I want to get you on the podcast. And we're a sponsor of your great YouTube channel, which we'll talk about towards the end of this. But, you know, I was excited and I was also a little nervous. I told my wife last night, I said, you know, I want to make sure he sits with me so he doesn't feel like an outsider, doesn't know anybody there. You know, we had some cool different
You guys
there.
Made me feel like home. Dude, right off the bat. You came in
like, you are the most personable person I've seen in a long time. Walking in the room, doesn't know the 25 people there. And you were making friends like nobody's business. And none of them even knew really what you did for a living. Talk like, really? Just like you said. And then they're intrigued and they're asking, but you just came in, and that's really unique. And I think that you've learned that over the years, the skill sets, the people skill set you have, that sales skill set, the pitch of pitching yourself and opening up and not being that introvert when you need to be. You know, all right, in this situation, I've got to open up and do this. And you lit up that room last night, and that was impressive.
You know, but I will say, I think it speaks a bit to your crew. Your crew is really easy to get to know. That. Really great easy. People, you have so many good people, not just your family, but your friends, which really are your family too. Yeah. So great. I mean, I had a fun time. A lot of times, you know, going to that can be hard, especially for an introvert like me. You're like, man, I don't know how I'm going to get on. This might be more of a chore than enjoyable. And I had a great time. I felt like I was with family. And I think when you approach with that mentality, just a positive thought more than anything, good things can come of that. And you know what? Life is a mentality, especially with people. You
said it. That's it.
You gotta make the environment in your head. You know, if you let your head control you and have these negative thoughts about what could be or what it's going to be instead of what it could be, I think that can really be negative on you and have the opposite effect. So for me, I'm always thinking about something in the most positive way. You know, if I don't interact with someone well on the race team, I go, you know what? I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out how to make our relationship better. And, you know, some of that's just the psychology of it, right? We're different people and, you know, maybe I'm not getting on with this mechanic, but you know what? That relationship's important. I've got to make the most of it. I got to figure out how to communicate with that person. I'm not going to be lazy about it and say, hey, we just don't mesh and I'm just going to avoid him. It's just, you can't do that. You can't do that in business. You got to figure out how to make things work and get the most out of the people around you. And I think it's the same when you show up to these type of interactions. But like I said, you made it easy on me. Your team's so simple, but it was hard for me. Like, you know, going back to the introvert thing, that's not natural for me. I've had to learn to thrive in those environments. You know, I go to dinners all the time for our partners or, you know, for our company, and trying to be able to interact and learn people's stories or at least enjoy the moment with them. I mean, we're a team at the end of the day, and they look at us as the drivers of like, kind of the light of that. They want to see the goodness from you guys, and they want you to speak knowledgeably about what you're doing together. And I don't naturally do well with that. I'd rather just not talk. So to be able to show up and have that energy is something I've had to work on. And I think you got to know that. I mean, if you're not good at something, work at being good at it. If it's a skill set that you need to be successful at your job and you really want to do it, figure it out. You can do it. Everyone can do it. Anyone can figure it out.
I love that. Your mindset is so clear and so positive. And that's really important when you're racing, obviously. You've got to stay positive. You can have a bad pit. We're talking about a caution flag can come out. Now you can't pit. And now you're in the back of the race and you have to stay positive. So, the more struggles you have on that, on the racetracks, it's really making you stronger, better, wiser, able to adapt to the way what life throws at you and in your industry. Let me ask you this. So I want people to understand, how long have you been a pro now?
9 years.
9 years.
9 years.
2 championships.
Yeah.
You almost had a third this year.
Almost.
And you won the last race of the year.
Yeah, we were close this year. I mean, it almost worked out. 3 would have been great, because then we would have been 33% for championships over the years, right?
I know.
But I had to work hard. I'm so fortunate. Just getting picked up on the pro level is so difficult, but it's like 2 different mountains. You have that first mountain that you try and climb as a junior driver. You're like, I just want to get on the playing field. I want to be there with the pros and compete.
Yeah.
But when you get there, welcome to the new mountain. How do I stay here? And like, how do I become successful with the pros? And it's such a different task. And that's where a lot of people, they may have a fun career and like, hey, I made it to that top level, but they didn't conquer the top level. And that's what I wanted to do.
I want to ask you about that. I tell everybody in our business, and I tell everybody that I meet, every day is a playoff game. Every success that you have is a playoff game. Every race you won, it's like a playoff game. You're not done. Every championship you've won, when you settle, you're done. Everybody's going past you. The mountain never ends. And I see that in you because you're talking about a new mountain. You love those challenges, don't you?
Dude, it's a mentality.
Yeah.
It's the same. Every race I approach, it's just funny. What works really well, a lot of people think if you're having a great day, say it's halfway through the race, you got a big 20-second lead, you're just crushing everybody. You just ease off. Don't take any risk. You just ease off. Just coast to the finish line. A lot of people ask that. They were like, man, you were so good today. That first half of the race, you crushed everybody. Did you just take it easy towards the back end? When you let off the gas, that's when trouble happens. I'm dead serious. Like in a race car, when you say, I'm going to take it easy here, I'm just going to back off a little bit, that's when trouble catches up to you. You end up making a mistake you didn't even realize. You've got to stay, I'm 100%, not over 100%, but not under it. I'm 100% the whole race. I'm focused the entire time. That's when you have a successful race. And I think it's the same thing out of it. When you've got to stay in that right zone. You're pushing enough, right on the limit, but not over it. And I think that's, that mentality is what can drive you forward and helps you become the best. Because I didn't want to get to the ground floor and be like, hey, I was here one day, and I had a great time. It's like, no, I went there and I crushed everybody. I was the best that ever did it. And I'm not there. I've not done that, but that's what I'm striving to do.
It's your goal.
Yeah.
And even if you do get there, it's still not good enough until you keep going. That's in your DNA. That never ends. That's why I use that playoff mentality. In our business, we went from 3 million to 14 million to 40 million to 100 million to 185 million to 350 million. And I got buddies, man, how does it feel? It doesn't matter. We're not done. Yeah. We're not done. And I feel like, you wanted that third championship, and I believe you're going to get it maybe even this coming year, but you're not done. You want to just keep stacking. When you keep chasing in that mountain, in that mentality, you just keep raising. I say you can't take an elevator. You keep taking the stairs. You don't want the stairs to end, because that's how you get to be the greatest, if that's your goal.
Think about how strong your legs will be too.
I should have done leg day today. I didn't. I did a little bicep. So let's talk about a little bit about family. You told me how you met your wife.
Yeah.
That was one of the coolest stories I've heard in a long time. And you had all the ladies behind us like, oh my God, he married a princess. Like, talk about that. I thought that was so phenomenal. Very
unorthodox. Yeah. It's like not a normal story. It is cool. It's kind of a hard one to describe. It's not. It is and it isn't. So I met my wife at Disney World. Mm-hmm. She was cast in entertainment, so she was very close friends with the princesses, which is kind of like insider speak for she was one. She used to play a princess, and I was there with my family. We were having actually a Christmas vacation. We hadn't had one in many years, and for some reason we chose Disney World to go to. My sisters love it there. We had gone there when we were kids, so we had a family vacation. We were at dinner, at Cinderella's castle. I don't know what these listeners are going to think of this, but
I think it's so cool.
So what happened? So we're having dinner at Cinderella's castle. Ashley, my wife, she played Ariel. And, I was 20 at the time. And of course I'm, super interested in, the princesses, and they're all pretty and they all seem super nice. But there was this one that just was so captivating to me. I'm like, and it wasn't just because she was dressed up as a princess. I'm like, who is this person? Like, because I know, she's just a character and she's just playing the character. I'm like, who is this? And everyone at the table knew, because we had this really cool interaction. I say she struggled to stay in character. Ashley would disagree. I think, we had a fun conversation going. So anyways, end of night comes and I'm like, well, how can I meet her personally? I don't want the interaction to just end here. And that's like impossible. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of security measures for
you're not going to leave the
there.
park and just figure out who these women are that are playing these characters. So I'm like, well, how can I contact HR? Like, there's got to be something clever I can do to figure out who the heck that person is. So I'm like searching online, like trying to come up with a strategy. I'm like, how am I going to find her? 2 hours in, I'm like, this is impossible. Like, I'm never going to locate this person. It's just not going to happen. 2 hours later, lo and behold, get an email in my inbox. It's like midnight, the same night. I just met her like 3-4 hours ago at dinner. It's from Ariel. She literally signed the email from Ariel. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So now I know who it is. And I'm like, well, how did she find me? How did she get my email? Lo and behold, I don't think I've ever told this story on camera, but my dad ended up being like the ultimate wingman.
The matchmaker.
He was the matchmaker. Yeah. I mean, my dad, who helped make my career happen, also helped me meet my wife somehow. He paid for the dinner, and he had put down my information. He put down my email, and I think he told the server, he was like, please. She
emails you, and you guys.
She emails me. We start emailing for 2 to 3 weeks, like we're sending love letters to each other from the 1900s, like early 1900s. It was like an old school, new school process. 2-3 weeks in, flew back down, took her out on our first date, and the rest is history.
Found out she had a different color hair, though.
Yeah, I picked her up. I don't know what I was expecting. I picked her up. I'm like, ready for the red hair.
Oh, yeah.
She's not redheaded. So I'm like, oh, yeah, of course not.
My bad,
what am I
bad,
thinking? I'm going to actually pick up Ariel? And then she drops a bomb on me. Like, we meet, we have this amazing first date. I'm like, I love this woman. She's moving to Japan in like 3 weeks. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're moving to Japan. She's already signed a contract. She's ready to go over there. So then I had to travel to Japan to basically date my future wife. So Crazy story.
That is a cool story, though. And I said something to you last night. I said, well, dude, that's going to be great to tell your kids. And you don't have kids yet. But I want to emphasize before we wrap this episode up. We were talking in the car. You were asking, hey, what's it like having kids? Because you get nervous. Anybody that's not a father, you're nervous to be a father. Anybody that's not a mother, you're nervous to be a mother. And I explained to you, it is game changing. It is life changing. It is when you know that there's a God, when you look at your child and you go, wow, that's mine. You said some things in this interview that made me really want you to think about this. I would challenge you to think about this and go home to your wife and talk, right? I'm not saying go make babies, but listen, right? Or whatever. It's fun trying, but listen. You had a great father who instilled great things in you. You talked well about your sisters and your mom. You have a great family. You saw that. You saw how he stepped up to be the matchmaker. You saw how impactful that was. You are mesmerizing when you come into a room, the way you carry yourself. It's, when I conversate with a lot of people, I've told you this last night, the depth of the conversation only goes so deep sometimes. It doesn't mean I'm smarter than everybody. It just means that sometimes I'm like, I'm struggling to You spoke to all walks of life last night and had in-depth conversations with people. So you are able to adapt to any of that. And for some of the credentials that you saw and talked about your family, especially your dad stepping up, I think you need to understand that you would be a great father. You've got a great story to tell. You've got great experience from your dad that you can carry on that kind of emotion and love. I think dude, that right there, it shows it. I mean, you are so appreciative of your father. That's the kind of thing that what you saw him do for you, that you could do for your children. I'm telling you, it's next level.
I need that. Honestly, that's funny. This is like turning into a friendship more so than just, hey, us, catching up and working together and all that. But you need that. I think you need people in life because the tough thing for me is the process of trying to vet that out. You cannot fully vet out that future, that potential future,
it's
right?
Hard. You're a white and black guy because every you make a mistake, your car wrecks. You have issues. So it's hard for you to do, but I'm telling you,
I overanalyze everything.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I
hey,
get it.
okay, a race
get
is
it.
about to happen. I'm going to analyze every part of that race and how it could go before I actually do it. And, with trying to have a family, you can't do that. I think you can, you try and make the right decisions. You find the right person, the love of your life.
And you guys have got a wonderful story. I mean, how cool is that?
It's a cool story.
I believe in love at first sight. I believe in fate. I mean, I met my wife in high
I didn't
school.
think I did. I didn't know. I mean, I'm a 20-year-old kid.
You don't know till you know, right?
And then it happened to me and I'm like, man, I think that may be true. Because that's what happened with me and Ashley. I'm like, I loved you as soon as I saw you. And I never loved a girl before. I didn't focus on girls. I was focused on racing. Never had a girlfriend before. Never a long-term commitment. And she changed it like that. And I've never experienced that. And I would never have believed like, hey, you can just love someone by seeing them. That's got to be lust or something else, And it wasn't, dude. It was like, man, I saw her, fell in love immediately. Can't believe it.
So the first time I met my wife, I was in weightlifting class. I never have told this story on camera either.
Okay.
And
pulling it out.
Yeah. And I was in 10th grade. She was in 9th grade. I thought I was pretty cool and slick, but I look over and there's this girl here in phys ed, and she's, staring at me and I'm staring at her. I'm like, damn, I mean, I'm like drawn to her like never before. I've had lots of girlfriends. I didn't feel that way. There's a weird, kind of like what you're talking about, attraction there. It's like a pull. I'm like, okay. So we go to lunch and I'm trying to play it cool. Her friend comes up and is like, hey, my friend Elizabeth wants your phone number. Like, sure. This is before they had like cell phones. Okay. We had beepers. Okay. And so I give the phone number and, I wave or whatever and I go home. Well, I have this piece of car. I mean, me and you going to dinner and having a few drinks costs more than my first car. My car was an 84 Dodge Lancer, piece of shit, 12 colors. I mean, it was bad, but it was mine. And I was 15 and I lived in this trailer park called Southbrook. And I'm over there and I'm cleaning and armor-rolling my piece of shit car. And I mean, I'm, I got hubcaps. I'm cleaning the hub. I'm doing everything I can because I love my car. My old man, without a license, I could drive it in the trailer park. It was no big deal. A couple of hills here, whatever. So I was all jacked up. Well, while I'm cleaning my car, jamming to some music, my mom comes out with a portable phone, not a cell phone, and says, hey, there's a phone call. I'm like, oh. I answer it. It's her friend Carla going, hey, you're not going to call Liz? Because she gave me her number. I said, I haven't had a chance yet. Sorry, because we swapped numbers. I'm messing with my car. Well, I go to a party that night, and on the way to the party, we get in a car accident. My buddy's driving. We get in this bad truck accident. He's a little jacked up. I get brought home from an ambulance. I'm okay, but it was just a wild accident.
Yeah.
I get home. This is when long distance was super expensive. My wife, Elizabeth, back then calls me from Virginia, and I happen to answer the phone. I'm like, yeah, I was going to this party. We talked for like 6 hours, and I knew. And the first time that
6 hours,
6 hours, long distance, Virginia to North Carolina on the phone back in 95. I knew after school came that week, she walked me to the top parking lot and I kissed her. I got in the car with my buddy Benji and I said, I'm going to marry that girl. And he said, man, you're full of shit, man. I said, nah, dude, there's something about her. Lo and behold, we got 4 kids, grandkid. We've been together, on and off 25 years, but married for almost 20.
Yeah.
And I'm here to tell you that does happen. And when you know. And, we struggled having kids at an early age, and you adapt and you learn things. And it is the scariest thing. I'm like you. I overanalyze everything. And if there's not a process, it doesn't make sense to me. And if I don't have a plan, I have to see 30, 60, 90, 6 months, a year, 2. I have to see everything. I look very deep. It's not short-sighted for me. You're the same way. The way you're talking about things, I can tell. You're like, look at it. So it's hard for you to envision, what does that look like for me as a dad? Because you have no idea. It's something that you're like, I don't even know how to fathom that yet. I'm here to tell you that, I have 4 wonderful kids. 3 were and 1 was planned, and she throws it in their face. I was the only one planned, right? It was our second one. But I'm here to tell you that there is always a plan, and whatever happens, I think that you and your wife sound like you guys would be fantastic parents, and you would really make a difference in being able to instill what your dad instilled to you, to instill to your children and give positive outlook.
It's good for you to tell me that. I need that every now and then, that perspective. It's hard. And I love that. What I like about
that challenge is the greatest challenge, because then it's still not enough. It's like, oh my goodness, I'm still chasing this, but wow, it just feeds the fuel, dude.
I love that. I hear that so much too. Everyone that I've talked to only speaks positively about it. So I believe you 100%.
And taking your kids to Disney. Hey, mom used to be a princess. I mean, it's pretty gangster.
It is a cool story.
So listen, how can people follow you? I want to talk about your YouTube channel. Bring that up. Let's talk about that real fast.
Yeah. So I started this early in 2020. We wanted to do something new. it's hard nowadays. There's a lot of forms of media. Everyone's got so much out there. And for me, I was like, you know what? No one in racing is really doing this behind the scenes look. So some teams started dabbling in it, but no race car drivers have really done this like behind the scenes throughout a race weekend.
Yeah.
I'm like, it'd be so cool. Like people follow us, they watch the results online. You know, we have different publications that show practice, qualifying, the race. People are always following throughout the weekend. Then they watch us on TV, you know, they see the race. I'm like, well, it'd be so cool for people to just have that inside look each day of the race weekend. Normally you show up for Friday, it's practice day, Saturday's qualifying, Sunday's the race. I'm like, let's film every day and just give people, you know, a 5 to 10 minute cut up of what we did. And the next day they can see what happened yesterday. And so that's what we did. We started this Admit One, which we thought was kind of cool. You're like getting an admission ticket to an event, you know, and you get you get to see the behind the scenes of it. And so we're trying to grow that. And honestly, we've had such good reaction. People are just like, this is so cool to see a little bit more. We already loved watching the race weekend. This just gives us this better access that we didn't have. So yeah, we started that early this year. We're going to just try and grow it, try and make it better. Yeah, and give people that insight that they wouldn't have normally had.
Becomes more real to them. Like everything you guys go through, not just getting in and racing on Sunday. And the process.
What I like about it, is racing is deceptive in ways. You know, you watch it on TV and you think you know what goes into it. You're like, well, I drive a car every day. I know what it's like to drive a race car, you know, and I can imagine what you guys do. And it just seems so simplistic. You know, it's just the driver, and whatever driver does the best job that weekend is the winner. Yeah. There's so much more to it. There's so much more we're doing, so much more we're thinking about, a lot that we go through on a race weekend. People don't see that. So it's really fun to try and give a little bit. You know, you're not getting the full perspective, but way more perspective than you would have had before. And I think people appreciate that look that they wouldn't have normally had.
I agree. They can find that on YouTube. Just Admit One.
Yeah. So, search my name, Josef Newgarden. It's really easy. I'm Josef is my first name.
People need to know that.
But honestly, you just type.
That's a cool way to spell it, by the way.
I got one of those names. You type in my name on Google, nothing else comes up. Like there's no other Josef Newgardens out there. So I guess that's the one thing. It's kind of an unorthodox name, but no one else has it. So yeah, you search that, you'll find my YouTube channel, you'll find all my other channels. But YouTube is where, you know, I really want to put some effort in, and it's been fun. You and me are teaming up on it, trying to get that word out. Yeah, we just got to grow it. You know, you start something. The hardest thing is just starting it and continuing it, you know, and it speaks to business too. You know, social media nowadays, it's a lot like that. Like it's hard to find a lane and grow it. And people, they end up starting and they're like, they do it for a couple months and they're like, man, I'm just hard to get traction. And they just stop. And it's the worst thing you can do. It's like you have to keep going. And it might take you a couple years. It may take you 5 years, it may take you 10 years. But if you're passionate about it,
you'll get there.
You'll get there. And you got to stay relentless. That was actually my hashtag this year, was relentless.
Hashtag no filter.
No filter.
Remember last night?
Organic, natural.
That's right, baby. Check out these
brows.
Shout out to Lash Lounge in Birmingham.
She was there last night. She's got a great company. Go see her.
Yeah, she does. Yeah, she's good. Well, Josef, thank you so much. I agree on the friendship thing. Thank you for giving the tips out there for people to understand that they got to have tenacity to follow their dream. They got to be passionate. They can't take no for an answer. You can't let yourself be an introvert control your destiny. My man Josef here said, nope, not having it. Came out of his box. Found a way to make things happen, even when the cards were stacked against you. You've got a wonderful story, wonderful family, wonderful business. I wish nothing but the best. I called it last night. There's going to be a day in your future that you race and win the Indy 500 and you fly and race and win the Coca-Cola 600. I believe it, brother. That's going to happen. I truly believe that.
I love that. It's been a goal of mine, actually.
That would be to fly the helicopter like Tony Stewart did.
If you're calling it, I want to do it. I want to do it.
Just make sure I get to come to the pits to see.
You're a part of it 100%, Jayson.
Thank you so much. That's a wrap here on True Underdog. Check out Josef Newgarden, baby. Bam! And that concludes another episode here on True Underdog. If you're interested in hearing more, make sure you subscribe at iHeartRadio, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the YouTube channel. You can always visit TrueUnderdog.com, subscribe to all of them. Make sure you check out our newest episodes coming out on Mondays and Thursdays. True Underdog, baby. Bam!